Hey ladies, welcome to week 4 of Ecclesiastes. My name is Autumn. I am one of the pastors here on staff at SCG, and I get to the fun task of kind of wrapping this whole book up for you. So what you may not know about me is that before I worked at SCG and was called into ministry, I actually was in marketing. And one of my biggest clients in marketing was actually pet doors. And so I spent a significant portion of my life trying to learn how to market pet doors. And we had this strategy with pet doors. You're going to learn more about pet doors today than you ever wanted to know. But we had this strategy with pet doors, and it was a good, better, best strategy. Okay, so you can buy a pet door and you could buy a good pet door. And that pet door is going to be perfectly functional. It's not going to be fantastic. It's basically going to kind of be like a hole in the wall. But your pet is going to be able to get in and out of your house. It may get its like tail caught in the door and the door may break in like a year, but that door is going to get you through and it's super cheap. So it's functional. It'll get you through. Okay. So that's kind of the cheap option, the good option. And then we offer a better option. And the better option is like so much better than the good option. So the better option is going to look nice. It has like a nice frame. It has a flexible flap so that your little cat's tail doesn't get caught in. They can see through it more easily. It's just all around a much better option. This is really the option that companies want you to go for, is that better option. And then we actually have the best option. And the best option, and that middle option's kind of a little bit pricier, but you're going to want to pay it because it's going to last for forever. Now, the best option is just amazing. It's like the Mercedes-Benz of pet doors. It's actually electric, and your cat gets a special collar that when they like walk up to the door, it opens just for them. It won't open for anyone else's pet. So only your pet goes in that. So if you have like a skittish cat, it's just for them. Like, oh, they have their own concierge and they actually like wipe their feet. Well, no, it doesn't actually wipe their feet when they come in, but you get the picture, so you have the good option where it's like, you don't really want that option. You got the better option, which is the one you really should choose. And then you have the best option, which is just like, only rich people are actually going to get that option. And as Gwen kind of talked about last week, this has kind of been a little bit of what the teacher has been doing with Ecclesiastes for us. So he kind of says, okay, you've got life. And life is like your good option. So you can just kind of live it. You can do what everybody else does. You can kind of muddle your way through, and it might be okay. You might survive. Or there's a better option. And the better option is the one you really should choose. And that is the path of wisdom. And he outlines a bunch of ways that you can live a better life with wisdom. Now, it's interesting, and both Deb and Becky kind of talked about this a little bit, is that he doesn't really talk about the best option. And, as Americans, we all are trained in this good, better, best thing. We're like, skip the good, maybe we'll focus on the better, but we really want the best option. Just tell us the best option. And actually, the teacher never really focuses on the best option because he's kind of stuck under the sun. He's not looking into the future. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit at the end. But for right now, we're focused on this better option that he is presenting us. And in chapters 9 through 12, the teacher lays out kind of 3 different scenarios where wisdom is called for, where this better option is called for, and offers us his wisdom in how to deal with these different scenarios. So the first one is in dealing with rulers. The second one is his wisdom on work and investing. And the third one is his wisdom on being young, being a youth, and how you should live your life. So the first one is going to be, it starts in chapter 9. And it's chapter 9, verse 13, right where Gwen left off last week. And it's going to go from 9:13 through 10. It goes all the way through 10:20. So what I'm going to challenge you to do right now is just pause your video, and I want you to read those chapters. So just take a minute and read those verses so that you know what I'm talking about when we actually get into it. So pause. Okay, welcome back. I'm glad that you took the time to actually read that, which I know you all did, and none of you just let it run through to like get Autumn onto the next section. But here, if you did, you're going to miss out. Okay, so in 9:13 through 16, it starts out with this section right here. Okay. I saw also under the sun an example of wisdom that greatly impressed me. There was once a small city with only a few people in it, and a powerful king came against it, surrounded it, and built huge siege works against it. Now there lived in that city a man who was poor but wise, and he saved the city by his wisdom. Okay, so that would be a fantastic story. But this is the teacher, so he can't just let the story end there. And so he goes on to say, but nobody remembered that poor man. So I said, wisdom is better than strength, but the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are no longer heeded. You know, this is a really excellent example of why this teacher is just infuriating. He reminds me of my brother that sometimes we'll have these family discussions and I'll like make a statement, or someone in the family will make a statement, and my brother just decides that he's going to disagree just to disagree, just to bring up another opinion and just to get us arguing. I feel like that's kind of what the teacher does here. You just want him sometimes to pick a side. But what he's really doing is exploring kind of all of the aspects of wisdom. He doesn't want us to put all of our hope in wisdom itself, because wisdom itself isn't the answer. Trusting God and knowing that life is just a vapor and that life is passing us by. That's what he wants us to constantly remember. And so he's always going to explore both sides of the argument. And so he says in here, he says that this poor man, he came and he actually saved his city. And wisdom is better because for him, his life is better that he's alive and he didn't die. His city didn't get destroyed by that crazy mean king, and he was able to live. But in the end, he was still poor and he was still despised and he was still kind of looked down on by everybody else. And so we need to understand that wisdom is awesome. It's better, but it is not like our ultimate salvation, the ultimate thing. And so he goes on, the teacher goes on in this next section that you just read to explore how wisdom in this world works with wicked rulers. He kind of introduced a wicked ruler in that little story. And so he really takes that. And through the next few verses, he's going to kind of explain how we can live in a world with rulers, where we're under authority, we're not in charge, and how we can live in that world. And obviously, I don't think very many of us grew up in a country that had a king. If you grew up in the United States, we have presidents. And so we don't really understand that concept of like authoritarian government. But I do think that we've probably all had maybe a boss or a teacher in our life. And if any of you have ever had a bad boss, you might actually really relate to some of this stuff. So think about a bad boss. And here's how I would describe a bad boss. Is somebody who won't listen to my ideas, somebody who's moody and unpredictable, somebody who's irrational and emotional, somebody who only like draws people around them or buddies up with people who just kind of feed their ego, and only listens to people who tell them what they want to hear. Like, that's a bad boss. But that's exactly who the teacher is talking about here. He's actually talking about a king who could kill you. Your boss, probably the worst they can do is fire you. But we're going to go ahead and just take some of those ideas and think about applying them. Even if you have a fantastic boss, think about applying them to your life and your current situation right now. Okay, so I'm going to summarize what you just read and what he says in the rest of 9 and all of 10. So I have a few points. So one is people in authority are not always just and fair. Okay, that's kind of one of the big themes that comes out of that chapter. And the reality is, as we read in this section, rulers should be just and fair. They should be just and fair, but they're not always. They should pick people who are wise and judicious and fair. They should pick those people to be the people that are around them. And together, that ruler and those wise people should be able to guide their country in the right direction. But the problem is they don't. They don't do that. And a lot of times they do exactly the opposite. A lot of times they pick fools because somehow, we don't know why, and he doesn't know why, fools can convince everybody, maybe, or not everybody, maybe just the people that are in authority, that they're not foolish, that somehow the words that are coming out of their mouths are wise. And everybody can see that they're foolish, except for maybe somehow the people that matter. And so your boss and people in authority, they should be picking you. They should be picking you and listening to you, but they're not going to. And you just need to figure out how to be satisfied and how to live in that environment with an unfair leader and foolish people that surround you all the time that your unfair leader listens to. And so he gives us kind of 4 things that are really, really practical. I just want you to know Becky and Gwen are in here like talking about me and the things that I'm saying right now. So the first thing, because they're going to say, oh, Autumn doesn't do any of these things. The first thing is that you need to stay calm, okay? So in 10 verse 4, it says, if a ruler's anger rises against you, do not leave your post. Calmness can lay great offenses to rest. I don't know how many of you have ever had somebody like either send you a nasty email or come up to you like really angry, and your initial response is not calmness. Your initial response is either panic or defensiveness or anger. You know, we can get super angry at people. But what the teacher is actually saying here is just be calm. Take a breath. Give it a beat. If it's an email that you can put it off for a couple of days until you can actually respond from a place of calmness. And when you can respond from a place of calmness, a lot of times you'll find these things either 1, they've already blown over, or 2, somehow your calm word, you know, a calm answer diffuses wrath. Like that's another proverb that comes, that's later. It just diffuses the situation, and in your rational brain, you're able to kind of work your way through something, even with people who are in authority over you. The second one is work hard and with skill. And this is from verse 10. It says, if the axe is dull and its edge is unsharpened, more strength is needed, but skill will bring success. And a lot of times we feel like we are, lumberjacks that are out there working with a dull axe. You know, we don't have the right tools for the job. And what the teacher is saying is even when you feel like all the cards are stacked against you, if you work hard and you put all of your skills to bear, that you can actually get the job done. You can have success. And so don't spend your life feeling like a victim. Just work hard, push your way through it. Do the very best you can with what you've been given, and trust that God is going to be the one that brings you success. The third thing is choose your words wisely. So verse 12 says, words from the mouth of the wise are gracious, but fools are consumed by their own lips. At the beginning, their words are folly, and at the end, they are wicked madness, and fools multiply words. And so I think basically the summary of that section is lots of words equals lots of folly and even wickedness. Mind your mouth. If you find yourself in a situation where tons of words are required, you might want to think your way back through that situation and think of how you can say less to actually accomplish more. The more words that we have, really kind of the more we open ourselves up to folly and wickedness. And the last point from this section is don't talk bad about those who are in authority over you. What verse is it? It's the last verse in this section. It says, do not revile the king even in your thoughts, or curse the rich even in your bedroom, because a bird in the sky may carry your words, and a bird on the wing may report what you say. Complaining, really and truly, we have this thing that we call it, well, I'm just venting. Oh, I'm just venting. It's okay. And I'm just going to tell you, complaining is going to get you nowhere. I want you to think, and I would challenge you to try to think through a situation where I'm just going to call it what it is, gossip. We're gossiping to a coworker or to a friend in your work situation, where it ever actually accomplished anything good. Gossiping about your boss, gossiping about your coworkers, it's not going to help you. It may feel good in the moment. It actually may make you feel like you're making a friend, like you've got a compatriot, but that friendship is based on garbage. It's based on trash. And it actually, as the teacher is saying, could really get you in trouble. It could cost you your job. Think about what would happen if those words actually were repeated to the wrong person. And so he's saying, steer clear of it. Steer clear of it. I'm not going to say that you have to repress all of these like thoughts that you have. But I would find somebody who is completely disassociated from the situation, who doesn't know anybody involved, and talk about maybe what you're feeling. But really the focus of that needs to be on you and what you need to change, because you can't change that other person. You can only change you and what's inside of you. I just read the verse today that says, out of the overflow of the heart is what your mouth says. And so if your mouth is just spewing out trash, then gosh, what does that say about what's inside of you? It's just trash. So we need to ask God to really change what's inside of us so that what it comes out of us is just beautiful and not bitter and trashy. Okay, so that's it for that section. We are going to move on to chapter 11, okay? So in this little section, it's chapter 11, 1 through 8. It's like really short and sweet, and it's very practical. And so I want you to just take a second to read it, okay? So chapter 11, 1 through 8, go. Okay, so now that you've read it, I want to tell you kind of the main point of this section, as I see it, is that life is unpredictable. So work hard, invest long-term, and diversify. I told you it was practical. It's like a really just like, people think the Bible doesn't have like practical application for them. This is very practical. Okay, so this is the teacher. So he's not offering any guarantees. He's not saying if you do this, your life is going to be wonderful. He's just saying this is wisdom. This is the better choice for your life. This is the path of wisdom. So the whole section is underlined. You'll see over and over again that there is, it's underlined by unpredictability and the lack of control. We can't control the weather. We can't understand the way the world works. We don't do all of that. And so given that unpredictability, he still says that the path of wisdom is to have a long-term investment strategy. So he talks about sending your product over the ocean and just waiting for the return. Like you invest long-term and you just wait. You don't mess with it. Invest long-term and wait. And then he says, be diversified in your investment. He says, work hard at a lot of different things, because you never really know which one is going to fail and which one is going to succeed. He says in 11 verse 6, he says, sow your seed in the morning, and at the evening let your hands not be idle. For you do not know which will succeed, whether this or that, or whether both will do equally well. You just don't know. So kind of spread your net out wide and see what God brings to you. And if 2020 has taught us anything, it's that we are absolutely not in control. People with huge retirement funds saw them dwindle in 2020, and then they saw them like explode in 2020 and then dwindle again. And maybe we have no idea where we're actually at, when we can ever retire, if it's at all possible in our lives at this point. People who had maybe like these tiny, how many of us ever heard of Zoom before 2020? And now all of a sudden it's like one of the most important things in our life. How would we have survived 2020 without Zoom? I would love to have had stock in Zoom starting in 2019, because I'm sure in 2020 it did fantastic. I'm not in the stock market, so I have no idea if it's actually a good investment or not. So do not take my advice. And then who knew that toilet paper was the most valuable commodity that could have ever possibly been invented in the world? Everybody realized that they could not live without toilet paper. Me, I am a Charmin 2-ply, like ultra plush kind of girl. And so I made sure that was on hand. I had some in my house at all times. But you can't predict things like 2020. And so the teacher says that you do your best. You know that hard times are going to come, and so you can't stress out about them, but you do your best to prepare by investing with wisdom and hard work, and you just trust God for the rest. Okay, so Super practical little section there. Okay. So now we're going to get to the final and probably one of the most misunderstood sections of the book. This section and then the one that Deb dealt with on the first week. A lot of people really kind of wish they could just throw Ecclesiastes out of the Bible because of them, because they accuse it of hedonism, the idea that you can just live your life any way that you want it. Those people don't really understand what the teacher is actually saying here. And so we're going to try to dig into it a little bit deeper. So I would love for you to read chapter 11, verse 7 through 12, verse 8. So go ahead and pause the video and read that section, 11:7 through 12:8. Okay. So after everything that you've studied so far, when you start thinking about like what wisdom the teacher is going to offer to youth, I imagine that maybe it wasn't what you just read. I asked my kids actually at dinner last night. I told them kind of about Ecclesiastes and what the teacher was trying to do, the idea that everything is a vapor. I really hate the word meaningless because I just think it's so different than like fleeting and vapor. So I told my kids like fleeting, vapor, what do you think that they're going to say? What would a Bible teacher say to youth? What was the instruction? And my kids said, oh, you should save your money. My other son said that you should, what did he say? Oh, that life is short. And that one, you did get that right. But they all had these kind of like moral imperatives. And interestingly enough, that is just clearly not what the teacher says. I had my grandma when I was growing up, when I'd go visit her house, she would, I'd go out in the morning, my little head, all hair everywhere or whatever. And I'd stumble out to see her in the morning. And I love my grandma. She's a wonderful person. She's not the most affirming person in the world. So the first thing that she'd tell me when I saw her in the morning was, where are your footies? Those are what she called like the little socks that had pom-poms on the back. I needed footies because my feet were cold. Why aren't you wearing your footies? Your feet must be freezing. Go back in your room and put your footies on. And then I'd come out and she'd say, your hair is in your face. Get your hair out of your face. And then once I had myself all together, she would feed me breakfast and bacon and all that fun things that grandmas are supposed to do. But she started out by seeing all the ways that I was potentially in danger or doing something wrong. And I find myself doing that to my kids too. That I look at them and I say, okay, you're a youth and I have all these things that I need to teach you and I need to guide you and I need to push you this way. And honestly, a lot of us fall into that. That's what the Bible tells us to do, is all the things that are dangerous or wrong, that's what we need to focus on. That is not what the teacher is saying in this section. What the teacher is saying in this section, I'm kind of summarizing it by saying, have fun. Have fun and fear God. He starts out with his first instruction is the have fun part. Have fun. God has given us an incredible world. Go out there and enjoy it while you can. It's not going to get any easier to enjoy it than when you're a youth. Go use your body to run and to leap and to have fun. Remember your creator in all of this. All of this fun that you're having needs to be within his plan for you, doing all of this out of obedience and fear from him. But read this in 11 verse 9. It says, you who are young, be happy while you are young and let your heart give you joy in the days of your youth. Follow the ways of your heart and whatever your eyes see, go do it. Have fun. And this reminds me of when I was a little girl, also a memory associated with my grandma. She lived in Huntington Beach and we'd go down and visit her. And I knew how to swim. And we'd go down to the beach and they'd lather me up with sunscreen and they'd tell me, you can't go past this lifeguard tower. You have to stay in this area. But within those boundaries, with my sunscreen on and knowing how to swim, I could do whatever I wanted for the whole day, whatever I wanted to do. My mom was there watching me. The lifeguards were there watching me. I could go. And so I'd go run out and I think one of my favorite games was I'd literally lay where the waves were breaking and they'd roll you up the beach and then you'd roll back down the beach and you just go back and forth. And then I'd stay out in the water until I was so freezing cold. And then I'd run up into the sand and I'd just throw myself into the warm sand and I'd be all clean. And then I'd just get coated with sand and I'd just roll in the sand so that I could get warm from the sand. And then I'd get hot and I'd go jump in the water again. And that was my day. And I just lived my life and I had fun within the boundaries that God had given me. And I can tell you 100%, I am in my 40s now. That is not how I would want to enjoy a day at the beach anymore. But for me at that time, that was me just grabbing life by the horns and having a good time. And okay, so that sounds super fun. Like that's what he says to youth. That's how you're supposed to live. But remember, we're reading Ecclesiastes, and this is the teacher. He can never just let us be happy and have fun. We've got to have something doom and gloom in the whole thing. And so he jumps in and he says, the reason that you need to grab onto life like that is because, remember, life is fleeting. It's precious. It's a vapor that is just gone, that you can't grasp. And the end is coming. You are going to get old. That body that you can run and jump and play in the waves and all that kind of stuff, it's going to get old. And then if a wave crashes on you, you might get an earache, or you might hurt yourself on the shore, or you might step on a sea urchin. I don't know, whatever it is, you are going to get old and your body is going to break down. And at the end of it all, you're going to die and God is going to judge you. That's kind of sad for a youth okay. But this is the point. As these other ladies that have been teaching the last couple weeks, they've all been said, we have to, as we are grasping onto this life, we have to remember that this life isn't all there is. There's an end that is coming, and there is something beyond this. And he ends this section with, again, that his meaningless, the translation is meaningless, but I look at it as fleeting vapor. Everything is fleeting and a vapor. It's all going away. And it just reminds me, this is what he's been saying this whole book. It's a warning to us. Like, everything that you are pursuing, it's just so precious and it's going away from you. And it reminds me of the birth of my second son, actually. And, if you remember newborns, we don't have very much of our lives that we're around newborns. And so I think sometimes we get used to it in that time, and then we step away for a month and we're like, I don't know how to hold a newborn. Because even now, like, when someone hands me a newborn, I'm like, they're so little and they're so precious. And if I don't hold them just the right way, they're going to be damaged for the rest of their life. It's going to be so hard. And that's kind of how I treat this little precious thing. And I think that that's sometimes how we think we should treat life. But with the birth of my second son, it did not go well. He actually got himself into trouble. And when they had kind of got towards the end where I was going to be delivering him, every time I would push, his heart rate would drop dramatically. And so the time finally came that the doctor they were really worried about him. I was very close to a C-section, but the doctor finally got her eyes on him, and they saw that his umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck, not once, but twice. So by the time he was at the end of delivery, that was stretched. He really wasn't getting much blood flow. And so I was panicked and pushing, and my husband was standing there panicked and watching. And as soon as the doctor saw what was wrong, she got in there, and my husband says he cannot believe the amount of force that she got her hands under that little baby's head and just started pulling on his umbilical cord. And it was just like she was just grasping that baby and she was just pulling him into life. And she pulled that umbilical cord up over, all that force and everything that we're like, this precious little baby, you're not allowed to touch him like that. She grabbed that umbilical cord, slipped it over his head, and he was delivered and he was fine. And we look at life and we say, oh, it's precious. That's how we're supposed to treat it. But we're supposed to treat it like that doctor. We're supposed to grab it. We're supposed to get in there. We're supposed to say, this is the life that God has given me, and I'm going to live it to the fullest. And that is what I think the teacher is warning us in this moment. Don't let it slip through your fingers. Grab onto it. Take hold of it and live the life that God has given you. So we're finally going to come in verse 9. Yes, verse 9 of chapter 12. We're going to come back to the author. So you may have forgotten that we have the teacher, but there's an author. So kind of like the narrator that's at the beginning and the end. We're back to the author. So the teacher has concluded what he's saying. And now we're going to get the final word from the author. So I would love for you to take a moment and read chapter 12, verses 9 through 14. So go ahead and read them. Okay, so the pastor has drawn his final conclusion. And his final conclusion is that we need to let wisdom spur us on to action. Don't just sit on this wisdom. Don't sit on everything that the teacher has told us. We need to actually put it into action and do what God is telling us to do. And in the end, chapter 12, verse 13, he says, "Now all has been heard, and here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind." And here's where we get back to the good, better, best part that we started with today. All along, the teacher and the author, they've been focusing on what's better, and what's under the sun. But this we know, because this book is right in the middle of our Bible. There's all this rest of the Bible left, and we know the end of the story. There's another part of the Bible, the end of it, that unveils the best. And it's a best that's beyond our wildest imagining. The teacher ends, this is what he knows. He ends with, "For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether good or evil." And so the author, he ends with judgment, because that for him is where it ends. This is the end of the story. But our Bible doesn't end there. And this is my last point. God's best is yet to come. So the teacher and the author, they didn't know about Jesus yet. They didn't know that God was going to do this crazy thing and actually become a baby, that he was going to live a life that would redeem all of us, that would make it so that when we died, we would go to judgment. And then there would be a beyond. There would be something that was offered that whosoever would believe in Jesus Christ would not perish, but would have eternal life. And the final judgment is actually described in Revelation 20. So if you ever want to read a depressing, well, it's not very depressing, but if you ever want to read something that might disturb you a little bit, you can read Revelation 20. But you know what starts in Revelation 21? We heard about it and I think it was Becky mentioned it, is a new heaven and a new earth. And I'm going to read Revelation 21, verse 3 through 5 for you. And it says, "And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'Look, God's dwelling place is now among his people, and he will dwell with them.'" This is the beyond. This is the life above what's happening on the earth. "They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and will be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away." God is going to recreate this world, and all of even the good options or the better options, they are going to pale in comparison with the best option that God is going to offer us. He's going to give us new bodies. He's going to give us new occupations. We are going to have things to do in this new world, in this kingdom that he is preparing for us today. And so we are going to live out God's best for us, because his best is yet to come. We're so excited that you've been able to study Ecclesiastes with us, and we hope that you have just a great time discussing with your group this final week. God bless you.